You heard from him a little bit in the previous segment, interviewing Jah Marien Latham, Alabama football signee, also outstanding basketball player. Good morning, Drew.
Morning, Gary. How are you, man?
Doing great. We played the little interview that Jah Marien did with the media, and then you got it to talk to him one-on-one. You texted me yesterday. Of course, I followed the kid through his high school career and know what an outstanding athlete and young man that he is. But you, like me, realize that if you're especially at his size, a good basketball player, that type of athleticism and quickness needed to play at a high level, and he was the regional MVP, really can translate well into being a college football player. Your takeaways from watching Jah Marien last night against Decatur Heritage, and then also getting to visit with him.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think he's a very well-spoken young man, very focused. That's the thing that impressed me the most. I mean, because that was my first chance to speak with Jah, and it was also my first time to see him in person. And you always want to kind of take away some observations, and it's always interesting to see someone, whether it's, I know his main sport is football. I never got a chance to watch him play live. I've watched film, but to see him move on a basketball court, see how light on his feet he was, athletic with touch, outstanding hands. I mean, the play that he made that stuck out to me the most was he got an offensive rebound put back in the first half, Gary, and he held the defender off with his off arm, and then with his right hand, he snagged the rebound with one hand. One hand, it stuck to his hand like that, and then he was able to lay it off the glass for 2 points. And he just showed outstanding hands, outstanding feet. And, see, that's something Nick Saban always looks for. He likes multi-sport guys, and he likes linemen that are agile enough to be good basketball players. And I think that's significant for Jah. And, you know, just speaking with him, you knew it'd probably be a seamless transition because Freddie Roach recruited him for the Ole Miss Rebels. And that's really the only other school that was heavily involved in his recruiting process. So he's already got a really strong relationship with Freddie. The thing that struck me is I had heard he was, 6'3", 280. He's not bad. He told me he's 6'2", but he's 265. But he wears it very, very well, Gary. He's really well put together. And if you look at his frame, I think he could easily gain 30 pounds of muscle, be 295. And to me, he told me defensive end right now is what they're talking to him about. I see him in the future maybe as a guy that's either a very disruptive interior defensive lineman or perhaps an offensive guard, because I've always heard about Jah that if he gets his hands on you, it's over. And someone in recruiting that I truly respect, he's not out of the state of Alabama, so he has no dog in the fight. He's based out of Oklahoma and Texas. He watched Jah on film and said he's one of the most functionally strong kids that he's seen on film this year. So I think Jah Marien Latham has been underrated throughout this process. And after watching him play basketball for Pickens County and helping them reach Birmingham yesterday, I'm very, very excited about his future. I think he'll redshirt as a freshman, but after that, I really think he's got the natural talent to be a contributor at Alabama.
I do too. Good information there on Jah Marien. And plus, Pickens County has a proud athletic tradition, and they haven't sent a lot of players on to Alabama, but the two that I can remember, Tony Dixon, outstanding defensive back, safety, went on to play for the Cowboys, and Jah Marien's coach, Michael Williams, was an outstanding blocking tight end at Alabama, then went on to play tight end and offensive tackle in the NFL. So I think Jah Marien will make it 3 for 3, Drew, to be honest with you.
Well, yeah, he has a chance, and I think that's what stuck out to me. He said he talks to Coach Williams every day. He's got Marcus Barnes is his head basketball coach, and Marcus is a graduate of Pickens County High School. And it was a humorous moment after the game. We were talking to Coach Barnes, and he was really fired up about his team getting back to Birmingham. And Gary, he had been a part 15 years earlier of the Pickens County program that had broken through and gotten to a Final Four. And we were talking to him about some of the interesting back and forth he has with some of his team. Because trust me, he's a disciplinarian. He wants them to toe the line. They do not talk to officials. They listen to him, and he's the authoritative voice. And we were joking with him about that after the game, and he said, "Well, it's hard sometimes because I'm related to everybody on this team." It's pretty fun. It's a very tight-knit community over at Pickens County, and as you said, Gary, they have a very proud tradition athletically. Coach Michael Williams took them to the Final Four in football, and now they're going in basketball.
Indeed. They love their sports there in Reform. Let's stay with football, Drew. I'm anxious to get your take on the story that's developing with Charlie Strong, having visited with the Alabama coaching staff last week, expected to be back in Tuscaloosa possibly as early as today. It appears the former Louisville, Texas, and South Florida head coach and renowned defensive coordinator is set to join the staff, possibly in an analyst role. Your take on Charlie Strong and what that could mean for this Alabama defensive coaching staff if indeed this comes to fruition.
Well, I mean, certainly, if you can add Charlie Strong in any capacity, I think it's going to help Alabama. I mean, he's got a lengthy resume dating all the way back to Lou Holtz's time at Notre Dame. Then, of course, he helped Lou Holtz resuscitate the program at South Carolina. Went to help Urban Meyer win a national championship at Florida, became the head football coach at Louisville. Did a great job recruiting Teddy Bridgewater and having an 11-win season, winning a Sugar Bowl there. And then he turned around, went to Texas. He didn't have as much success. Maybe he wasn't the right fit there. But really, honestly, since Mac Brown left, Texas has not been able to find the right fit. And then he went on to South Florida, had some initial success, but couldn't maintain it. But there is no doubt he's a great defensive mind. Certainly he would be another great set of eyes and a resource for Nick Saban in Alabama. You know, he has such a great resume, you'd think he would be a strong candidate to be a part of the on-field staff. And I still have this feeling that Nick Saban's not done making moves, especially on that defensive side of the ball. I mean, they have to get better, and there's no doubt that the standard has slipped the last 2 years. And, Alabama's been really good offensively, as good as we've ever seen them with the last, in 2018 and 19 as far as production goes. But defensively, they haven't been able to play physical enough and make those stops needed to win games and force enough turnovers. So going to be interested to see what happens defensively for Alabama, because I think certainly you have to be able to score in this climate in college football, Gary, but you still have to play good defense to win. And Alabama's played good defense the last 2 years, but not great. And I know the standard is great at Alabama. When you build the beast, you got to feed it, and Alabama needs to get back to being elite on that side of the ball.
Indeed, because, pardon me, Drew, the goal is to get back into the playoff, to get back to Atlanta and win an SEC championship, get in the playoff, and win a national championship. That didn't happen this past season. I had this discussion yesterday. I want to get you to weigh in with where Alabama is at right now, the state of the program. The defending national champion is in your division in LSU. Auburn beat Alabama for the second time in the last 3 seasons. Those were the only 2 losses, but those 2 losses were costly. That meant no trip to Atlanta, no chance to win an SEC championship, a Citrus Bowl game against Michigan instead of not even a New Year's Day 6 bowl game. So at least for one season, Alabama is not going into the next season as a champion of any kind. What does that mean to you? I mean, you think that can be seen as a positive in terms of Nick Saban says it's always, tough to climb the mountain, but it's tougher to stay there. Alabama gets to be the hunter a little bit, at least in terms of its own division. Then when you look at the East, obviously Georgia is still there. Florida's coming. Tennessee's getting stronger. Where do you see Alabama right now in the SEC?
Well, I mean, I still think they're the best program in the West. No disrespect to LSU. They had one of the great seasons in SEC and college football history, 15-0 and national champions, but they lost a lot on their coaching staff and on their squad. So, and you have to prove that you can do it on back-to-back years. Alabama proved that they were able to do it. They've proven that they've been able to stay in the elite conversation. I mean, they've won 11 games 9 years in a row. We'll see if LSU's about to go on that kind of run. They haven't yet. So to me, on paper, Alabama's still the standard. When you look at the talent they have returning, they had 2, narrow losses last year that kept them out of the playoff to LSU and to Auburn. But, they still have outstanding talent. They've still got Nick Saban. And then I think it's LSU and Auburn kind of fighting it out for number 2 in the Western Division. Texas A&M, we don't really know yet what to make of them. They lose 4 games in Jimbo's first year, 5 in his second. They certainly won that battle for McKinley Jackson in recruiting, but that has to translate to wins, and it hasn't translated to enough wins. So until they break through, to me, they're no better than number 4 in the SEC West. In the East, Georgia right now is still the standard. They've gone to the playoff one time and played for the national title once. They have not won one since 1980, though. So they're still, to me, they're not. I don't consider them an elite program yet because they have not broken through to win a national title. Certainly, Kirby did win an SEC championship. But the East has been much weaker than the West in the last decade or so, really since Tim Tebow left the University of Florida and Urban Meyer as well. But I do think Georgia's the standard program. But I do think that we've seen Dan Mullen improve Florida. They look like they're finally coming out of this kind of abyss they've been in and morass where they weren't consistently a national program. They were up and down, kind of like a roller coaster. I think he's getting closer to being on equal footing with Georgia. Probably going to have to recruit a little bit better. And then Jeremy Pruitt, he wins 6 straight games at the end of the season. But let's not delude ourselves. They're improved, but they didn't beat a quality opponent. So I still think that the West is a lot deeper than the East. I think, and now you add Mike Leach to that equation, he is going to be a thorn in the side of some folks, probably Lane Kiffin as well. So I still think the West is probably the most difficult division in all college. The East is, got 2 good teams at the top, but I just don't know if they have the depth right now.
Drew, Nick Saban, when he came here, I think most fans were hoping for at least 5 years based on his track record. Maybe the most optimistic thought 7, 8, 9, or 10, but getting the program back to where it is. But the fact that he's going into his 14th season, when you remember the first few years here, it was always about where's he going next and all the job rumors. But he's going into his 14th season. Of all the accomplishments that he's had and the things he's done at the program, that might be the most surprising, that he's still here going into his 14th season. Would you agree with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, because Coach Saban, before he had come to Alabama, he had never spent more than 5 years at a place, and I believe that's how long he stayed at LSU. Some thought he might try to take another opportunity in the NFL because it didn't work out in Miami. It came close. If you get a Hall of Fame quarterback like Drew Brees, that league is so, it's just so quarterback-driven that you have to have a great one. If you get one, you can stay for a while. Look at Sean Payton in New Orleans because he got Drew Brees. So that kind of swung the pendulum there. But I think what Coach Saban realized is he was a college coach. He enjoyed recruiting. He still does. There's a lot of coaches that don't. But as you've heard Nick Saban say many times, he enjoys getting out on the road. They've made rule change after rule change to slow down Nick Saban, Gary, and yet he still recruits at the elite level. I think he enjoys building a team each year, being a part of one, even having new ideas on his coaching staff. And I think he just felt like in the NFL, it's tougher to keep a team together because of the salary cap and because of having to pay everyone big money. But if you're in college, you can recruit the best players. If you outwork them, you can bring in the best talent, and you can win, at a very high level. Alabama's giving him every tool he would ever need, and they're giving him more. I mean, they're renovating Bryant-Denny Stadium now. That's been the most amazing thing is Nick Saban has always been ahead of the curve facility-wise at Alabama, improving their facilities. They never stand pat. And the University of Alabama has always given him what he wants, and I think that's why he has stayed here. I think it's why he's going to finish his career in Tuscaloosa, and hopefully in a few years, Gary will be talking about his 20th season. And who would have ever thought that in the climate that college coaching has become? We saw Coach Bryant stay, for 25 years and stay for such a long time and have a storied run. A lot of people thought another coach would never do that again, but the more years that pass, it looks like Nick Saban could do that, and I think that's going to be one of the deals. I know everybody always says, well, it's going to be so difficult to replace Nick Saban. It was so difficult to replace Coach Paul Bear Bryant. But what it shows is if you get the right coach at a place like the University of Alabama where football means so much to the university and to the state, you can stay here for a long time. You can win at the very highest level, and you can become a true legend in your sport.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Before we get to the break and come back and talk some basketball, let's go to Tom. He's on the Gary Harris Show hotline, and he wants to weigh in on Jah Marien Latham. Good morning, Tom.
Morning, Gary. Morning, Drew. How are y'all?
Doing well.
Drew, I saw the Latham kid play football and basketball over here where I live. I don't live very far from Reform. And, I was thinking, watching him play basketball, I thought, you know what, he could play tight end. And I wanted to see what you thought about that.
Well, I mean, certainly he's already 265. If he stayed around that weight, at 6'2", I don't think there's any doubt with the hands I saw that he could play tight end. And maybe Alabama will give him a look there. Tom, you never know.
Saying, some of the great, Gary's already mentioned it, and of course I was chomping at the bit to call in and get my 2 cents in. But these great tight ends, Gronk and others in the NFL, they were good basketball players. And I'm telling you, to me, at tight end, that's a natural fit.
Well, and Tom, the thing is, though, the reason I always say, with Jah, nature's going to kind of take its course. He hasn't been in a college weight program and had the nutrition he's going to get at Alabama. What I'm expecting to see, though, as soon as that happens, he's going to start naturally gaining muscle mass and weight. And when he does so, he's going to be 295 pounds. He's going to be a beast that can move. I don't think it'll affect his speed and his quickness. I think that's God-given. And so I think when you look at that, he'll probably project inside on the offensive line or on the defensive line. And, of course, you could use him as maybe a situational tight end. We've seen Alabama do that with Kendall Randolph and Chris Owens. And he has great hands. But I do think with those hands, if he can get his hands on a defender and or an offensive lineman, he could be tough to handle. So I think when nature takes its course and he starts eating right and he starts working out with Scott Cochran, just like we've seen Bryce Young gain 15 pounds in 5 weeks, I think Jah will put on weight. It'll be really good weight, though. He's going to be really well put together, and I think he's got a chance after a redshirt year to develop into a really fine offensive or defensive line.
I think the money, though, I thought about this, too. The money for somebody, if he's as good as I think he is on the defensive line, that would be the money for him, don't you think?
Well, I mean, certainly you see Quinn Williams going 3rd overall in the draft and, making big bucks as an interior defensive lineman. There's no question that they're probably they're making more money than interior OLs. But you can make very nice money no matter the position if you can make it to the National Football League. And after watching Jah Marien Latham play basketball yesterday, I see why Alabama took his commitment so early. And you see the tools that are readily there. And I know he's just a 1A athlete, but some of Alabama's greatest football players ever played very small school, high school football, including one of my personal favorites, and that, of course, would be Town Creek's finest, Antonio Langham, who to me still is the standard of all that I've ever seen play defensive back at the University of Alabama.
Hey, thank you, Tom.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoy the show.
Thank you so much. All right, 5:48 or 9:48. We got to get to break. We're going to come back with a short segment, get Drew's thoughts on basketball and the start of the season in baseball as well. We'll get more with Drew right after this. Stay with us. All right, Drew, let's try to get to another phone call real quickly for you. Mark is with us. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Gary. Good seeing you Saturday.
Yeah, man. Always good to see you.
Hey, real quick. Hey, Drew, I heard something. I read something over the weekend. I don't know if it's true or not true. Auburn has been known to illegally tape your walkthroughs when you're down there playing in the basketball. And have you heard that? They got turned into supposedly we caught them last week doing it, but we turned it into the SEC. I guess if you're doing a shoot around, it doesn't matter. But if you're walking through defenses and offensive sets, it's a big deal. Any truth to that rumor? And get y'all's feedback. I heard it on Sunday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Drew, what do you know about that?
I read the story and I've heard about it. I mean, we've seen the New England Patriots be disciplined by the NFL for those kind of practices. Unfortunately, that's just part of it. Sometimes you compete Bama, because obviously Auburn's a little bit worried about the Tide and Nate Oates, and no matter what Bruce Pearl's college, which is amazing, SEC title, regular season, tournament, and then the Final Four, I think everybody understands after watching Alabama trounce Auburn and Coleman and really almost beat them in their own house without Herbert Jones. Well, let me say that. They had Herbert, but only for 7 minutes. But if they had their team complete, at least with a healthy Herbert Jones, they could have easily swept Auburn. So I think it just shows me that Auburn understands Alabama's coming and coming fast.
Drew, quick thought on the baseball team opening up with a 3-game sweep of Northeastern over the weekend at Sewell Thomas Stadium. The first 2 games were shutouts. I think we saw what we know is coming, and that's more talent. Outstanding freshman pitching, and then Owen Diodati in that lineup just went nuts. So I know it's Northeastern and tougher teams are coming, but this Alabama baseball program appears to be headed in the right direction.
Yeah, they've gotten better each year, Gary. They look much better coached 2 years ago. Last year they were more talented, and I think this number 7 recruiting class, they're even more talented this year. There's more depth in the hitting lineup. You've got a healthy Sam Prater batting cleanup. You've got Owen Diodati there at the bottom of the lineup in that 7 hole. You've got a guy in the 9 hole, Jim Jarvis, who I think is going to be an outstanding freshman in the SEC. And then you've got Connor Perleaf. You've got Antoine Jean. You've got a lot of freshman arms that I think are going to help them. And I think some of the returnees, like a Chase Lee, who was unhittable as closer on Sunday, was in his 2 innings, was really good. Jacob McNary had improved command. I think they're going to be deeper on the mound. I don't know if they're going to have front line starters quite yet. I think they can develop into those, but I think they're going to have a chance to have a good bullpen, more depth in that pitching staff, and then more depth in the lineup. Brett Auerbach is so versatile leading off. If they can get, the rest of the lineup from, 1 to 9 hitting, I think they can be dangerous. No doubt about it. TJ Reeves is a little rough this weekend. If he can start getting hot from that 2 hole, I think you know what you have with Tyler Gentry. I think this Alabama team can make some noise. I mean, certainly you're playing in the toughest division in all college baseball, maybe all college athletics. The goal for this year needs to be to get back to Hoover for the first time under Coach Bohannon. And if you get to Hoover, you got a chance to get into a regional. So a very promising first weekend, but anxious to see how they play later today, weather permitting, against the Troy Trojans.
Yeah, Drew, that Troy game has already been postponed. Just FYI.
I figured it might be,
yeah. Hey, great stuff, man. Good to catch up with you. I appreciate it, Drew.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, 9:50.